The Prodigal's Return. Adam Holloway stood at the edge of his hometown, the familiar skyline of Millbrook, etched against the fading light of dusk. 4 years had passed since he'd last set foot here. 4 years of self-imposed exile that had ended with a single phone call from his mother. Her voice, trembling and barely audible, had conveyed the news he'd never expected to hear. His father was dead. The circumstances were suspicious, she'd said, her words laced with a mixture of grief and confusion. The local police had ruled it an accident, but Margaret Holloway knew her husband better than anyone. Frank Holloway wasn't the type to slip and fall down the stairs of his own home, especially not after years of meticulous renovations to make the place safer as they aged. Adam took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air filling his lungs. He'd left Millbrook as a boy, running from his father's expectations, but he was returning as a man determined to uncover the truth. The weight of his backpack, containing little more than a change of clothes and his laptop, felt insignificant compared to the burden of unresolved conflicts and unanswered questions he carried within. As he walked down Main Street, memories flooded back. The hardware store where he'd spent countless Saturdays helping his father pick out tools for their latest home improvement project. The diner where he'd shared milkshakes with his high school sweetheart, Emily. The park where he'd had his last heated argument with Frank before storming out and catching the first bus out of town. The familiarity of it all was both comforting and unsettling. Millbrook seemed frozen in time, as if the past 4 years had barely touched it. But Adam knew better. Time had a way of changing things beneath the surface, of eroding foundations and revealing hidden truths. He arrived at the old Victorian house he'd grown up in, its gabled roof and wraparound porch a testament to his father's craftsmanship. Adam hesitated at the gate, his hand resting on the latch. The last time he'd walked through this gate, he'd been leaving with no intention of coming back. Now he was returning to face the ghosts of his past and the mystery surrounding his father's death. The front door opened before he could knock, and there stood his mother. Margaret Holloway's hair had more grey than he remembered, and the lines around her eyes had deepened, but her embrace was as warm and comforting as ever. "Oh, Adam," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so glad you're home." As they sat in the kitchen, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air, Adam listened intently as his mother recounted the events leading up to Frank's death. The more she spoke, the more convinced Adam became that something wasn't right. "Dad was working on a new project," Margaret explained, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. "He was excited about it, but also nervous. He'd spend hours in his study, making phone calls and poring over documents. I'd never seen him like that before." Adam leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What kind of project?" Margaret shook her head. He wouldn't say, just that it was important and that he needed to be careful. The next morning, Adam began his investigation in earnest. He started in his father's study, methodically going through drawers and files, searching for any clue that might shed light on the mysterious project. Hours passed, and frustration began to set in. Whatever Frank had been working on, he'd been careful to keep it hidden. As Adam was about to give up for the day, his eye caught a small irregularity in the wooden panelling behind his father's desk. Closer inspection revealed a hidden compartment, and within it, a single USB drive. With trembling hands, Adam plugged the drive into his laptop. What he found made his blood run cold. Financial records, surveillance photos and detailed notes all pointed to a massive corruption scheme involving several of Millbrook's most prominent citizens, including the mayor and the chief of police. Frank had uncovered evidence of embezzlement, bribery, and even links to organised crime. The project he'd been working on wasn't a construction job. It was an exposé that would shake the town to its core. Armed with this new information, Adam knew he had to tread carefully. If his father had been murdered to keep this information from coming to light, then Adam was now in danger as well. He needed allies, people he could trust to help him navigate the treacherous waters ahead. His first stop was the Millbrook Gazette, where his old friend Tom Jenkins worked as a reporter. Tom had always had a nose for a good story, and Adam knew he'd be interested in what he'd discovered. As he explained the situation to Tom in a quiet corner of a local coffee shop, he could see the reporter's eyes light up with a mixture of excitement and concern. "This is big, Adam," Tom whispered. "Really big, but it's also dangerous. Are you sure you want to pursue this?" Adam nodded grimly. "I have to. For my dad." With Tom's help, Adam began to piece together the larger picture. The corruption ran deep, touching nearly every aspect of Millbrook's governance. Building contracts were being awarded to shell companies owned by council members. Tax money was disappearing into offshore accounts. And anyone who got too close to the truth found themselves facing accidents or sudden relocations. As they dug deeper, Adam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Small things at first, a car that seemed to be following him, hushed conversations that stopped when he entered a room. But as the days passed, the pressure intensified. One night, as Adam was walking home from a late meeting with Tom, a black SUV screeched to a halt beside him. Two men in dark suits emerged, their intentions clear in their stern faces and clenched fists. "Mr. Holloway," one of them said, his voice low and menacing, "we need to have a chat about your recent activities." Adam's heart raced as he assessed his options. He was outnumbered and likely outmatched. Just as he was about to make a run for it, another car pulled up, its headlights illuminating the scene. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" Adam recognized the voice immediately. Emily, his high school sweetheart, now wore a police uniform and a determined expression. The two men exchanged glances before retreating to their vehicle and speeding away. "Thanks," Adam said, his voice shaky with relief. "I owe you one." Emily's smile was tinged with sadness. "Consider it payback for all those milkshakes. Now want to tell me what that was all about?" Over the next few days, Adam, Tom, and Emily worked tirelessly to compile the evidence and build a case that couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. They reached out to state-level law enforcement and media outlets, ensuring that the story would break simultaneously on multiple fronts. The night before they were set to go public, Adam sat alone in his father's study. He held an old photograph of himself and Frank, taken on a fishing trip when Adam was just a boy. The memory of his father's laugh, his strong hands showing Adam how to bait a hook, brought tears to his eyes. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I'm sorry I left, and I'm sorry I wasn't here when you needed me. But I promise I'll make this right." The next morning, Millbrook awoke to a town in chaos. News vans lined the streets, state police conducted raids on City Hall and the homes of several council members, and citizens gathered in shocked groups, trying to make sense of the revelations. As Adam watched the events unfold from the porch of his childhood home, he felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, and a deep sadness for the pain this would cause the community. But beneath it all was a sense of peace. He had uncovered the truth, honoured his father's memory, and in doing so found his way back home. Margaret joined him on the porch, slipping her hand into his. "Your father would be proud of you, Adam," she said softly. Adam squeezed her hand, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun was rising over Millbrook, ushering in a new day and the promise of change. "I hope so, Mom," he replied. "I really hope so." As the commotion in town continued, Adam knew that this was just the beginning. There would be trials, both in court and in the court of public opinion. The town would need to heal, to rebuild trust, and to forge a new path forward. And despite his initial intentions to leave as soon as the investigation was complete, Adam realized that his journey had brought him full circle. Millbrook was his home, and now, more than ever, it needed people willing to stand up for what was right. As he looked out at the town he'd once been so eager to leave behind, Adam Holloway made a silent promise to himself and to the memory of his father. He would stay, he would help rebuild, and he would make sure that the sacrifices made by his father and by others would not be in vain. The prodigal son had returned, and in uncovering the truth about his father's death, he had found his true calling and his place in the world.